Welcome to Math Enrichment 8. Since this is the first day of Math Enrichment, I just want to show you how you will get to your assignments and your lessons. You will go to My Big Campus and go to the groups. You should find your group that is labeled Math Enrichment 8 by Mrs. Walter. Notice on the opening page, this will always be a listing of your homework that you have for the current week. Right now I have March 9th through 13th, but by the time that you're doing this, when you go to your Math Enrichment page, it should be the current week, the 16th through the 20th. On this page, you will then go to Resources, and that's where you'll find your assignments. You should have a folder labeled Week 1. So I want you to go in Week 1, and today our lesson is going to involve Pythagorean Theorem. So when you go to the Pythagorean Theorem sheet, this will actually be your homework assignment, but oftentimes in enrichment, what I'll do is I'll pull up the actual homework assignment, and then I will do some problems from that assignment to show you exactly what to do, and then you'll have to do the remaining problems that are on the page. So notice this one has 22 problems. I will do a few of these today. Also off to the side, I will just talk about Pythagorean Theorem and some things in general. You're probably going to want to take some notes and so you can have these examples because they won't remain on this page after I finish this video. So first thing that I want to talk about with Pythagorean Theorem, it does involve right triangles. So when you have a right triangle, of course you've got a right angle, and the two sides that come together to form the right angle are known as legs. But the side opposite the right angle is really important. It is called the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, it's important to know that it is always the longest side. Really important information, it is always the longest side. So if you're working these problems out and you come to one where the hypotenuse is not the longest side, then you know you probably didn't do something correctly. So you need to go back and check. But the hypotenuse, the side opposite the right angle, is always the longest side. Alright, next thing about a right triangle. Here's what the Pythagorean Theorem says. You've got this right triangle, and of course all three sides have a particular length, but oftentimes they're only going to give you two of the lengths, and you have to find the third one that is missing. Well, a typical right triangle is labeled A and B for the legs. Those can be interchangeable. It does not matter which one is which. And C is our hypotenuse. So labeling the legs A and B and C is the hypotenuse, here's what the Pythagorean Theorem says. I can take the length of A and square it, that means multiply it by itself, plus B and square it. That will be exactly the same as C squared by itself. If this happens, if you have a right triangle, this will always be true. You will be able to find missing lengths of sides by using the Pythagorean Theorem. But look at these first few problems that are on this worksheet that you're going to do. It says, do the following lengths form a right triangle? They're asking us, is it a right triangle or not? So this is the converse of Pythagorean Theorem, and we're kind of testing it out. And here's what you would do. I will do number 1. And on number 1, I have the side lengths of 6, 8, and 9. So remembering what I said, 9 would definitely have to be C. The other two, it doesn't really matter. They would be A and B. So to decide if it's a right triangle, I'm going to take those lengths that are there, plug them in to the equation, the Pythagorean Theorem, and see if it's true or not. If it does equal out, then I would say yes, it is a right triangle. And if it doesn't equal out, it's no, it's not a right triangle. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 6 squared plus 8 squared. Does it equal 9 squared? I put a kind of a question mark over my equal sign. I hate to say that it's really equal until we know for sure. So 6 squared, 6 times 6 is 36. Plus 8 squared, 8 times 8, 64. Does that equal 9 times 9, 81? Well, 36 plus 64 is 100. That definitely does not equal 81. So in this problem, we would answer no. It is not a right triangle. If the problem would come out where they were equal, then we would answer yes. Let's look at number 3. And number 3, it's got sides 6, 8, and 10. So I know 10 would have to be C. It's the longest one. A and B for the others, those are interchangeable. It doesn't matter which one's which. So I'm going to test on number 3 if this is a right triangle. I'm going to say 8 squared plus 6 squared. Does it equal 10 squared? So 64 plus 36, does it equal 100? And I believe we already know the answer to that because we just did 64 plus 36. Yes, it most definitely is equal to 100. So on this problem, we would answer yes. Now, the other 4 that are there, 2, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to do those on your own in a little bit. You must show this work that I showed to get the answer correct. I do not want to see just yeses and nos. That's not enough information. On an I-step test, they would expect you to show all that work to get all of the full credit. So please make sure you show your problem, plug in the numbers, multiply it all out, decide if it's equal, and then answer yes or no. All right, we are now going to go on and look at one of the problems that's more typical for the Pythagorean theorem, okay, and that would involve finding the length of a missing side. So let's look at number 7. Number 7 lists the right angle right here, so that means opposite that right angle, this would be C. So I know we are looking for the hypotenuse. Remember, 4 and 8 could be A and B. You can interchange those. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to write my Pythagorean theorem down. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So I'm going to put 4 in for A. I'm going to put 8 in for B. And C squared is what's missing. So 4 squared is 16. 8 squared is 64, and that equals C squared. Now it says to add 16 and 64, so I definitely am going to do that, and 16 plus 64 would then be 80. And this is C squared. This is not the length of C. So please do not put that it's 80. That is C squared. But I've got to undo the squaring by square rooting. So what I'm going to do in my calculator, and you may use calculators on this, is I'm going to take the square root of 80, and it comes out to 8.944 plus some other decimal places. But if you look at the directions right here, it says round to the nearest tenth. So 8.944, when I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, that means you look at the hundredths place, that 4. It's below 5, so that means I'm going to round to 8.9 for the value of C. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do one maybe from the next page, from the back page, because I want to do one that's not looking for the hypotenuse. So let's do, I think I'm going to do number 16. Okay, so this is the actual worksheet you will be using. And it looks like for number 16, opposite the right angle, the 11 is C. That's my hypotenuse. So I'm going to go ahead and let this side that's missing be A and 3.9 be B. So I've got A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That's my Pythagorean theorem. I'd be better off to write that down to begin with. Please show these steps. We don't have a value of A, so I'm going to put A squared there. B is going to be 3.9, and we're going to have to square that. And C, it's going to be 11 squared. At this point, I'm going to use my calculator to square 3.9. I get 15.21. Oops, I didn't mean to put an equal sign. Bet you thought, where did she get that from? 15.21. And that equals, if I take 11 squared, I get 121. Now this time it doesn't tell me to add 11, the two numbers. It has a squared plus 15.21 equals 121. I need to get my a squared alone. So that means I'm going to be subtracting 15.21 from each side. And if I take 121 minus 15.21, I get 105.79. And that is not my answer. That is a squared. So at this point, I'm going to square root that amount. And I would get 10.285. Rounding to the nearest tenth, that means I'm going to look at the hundredths place, and that's an 8. It's 5 or higher, so it tells me to go up. So A is going to be 10.3. I knew it was going to be less than 11 because that's the hypotenuse. But A, I would round to 10.3. That is the conclusion of the lesson on Pythagorean Theorem. And now you need to do the remaining problems on the worksheet.